All right, hey everybody, another video coming to you. This one is how to protect you and your trust in court. We're gonna go over some basics for anybody that can use to kind of protect themselves and stay out of courts, and we'll go into some more intricate, kind of maybe more complicated stuff on the real solid protection for a trust that would make you never have to bring your trust into a court. It really should never be in a civil court at all. And if you do everything else right, you should never have to see the court. So we'll just go ahead and get started here. All right, this is brought to you through the website aguagiero.net. Lots of resources there, videos for how you can create and draft your very own trust. You wouldn't even need me except for maybe some questions or consultation. And yeah, there's downloadable templates there as well. So here's the format. What we're going to kind of do today, going to go over the system itself, the most important thing to avoid servicing and avoid being pulled into court, and then some rules that you probably don't know, you're probably not familiar with, because you probably haven't ever had did a case pro se. You've always relied on a lawyer. We're going to show you some things that will make the system a lot easier. And then, build a fortress. That's what we're doing. This is what this is all about, to really protect you and your assets to where nobody can trick you out of your stuff anymore. So, get going. The American court system. Civil law. All right, our courts are all civil law. And we've been brought up and taught that, civil rights is what protects us. But there's a trick there, because civil rights weren't around when the Constitution was written. Those were inalienable constitutional rights. And then 1866, we have these civil rights. And the story is that, for the slaves and anybody else that might have come to America that wasn't a citizen of a state, they created these civil laws for those people that kind of fall through the cracks. But unfortunately, the civil laws is a completely different animal from what from constitutional rights are, from what state citizens are. So, and it starts in just the use of the words. So civil, the word civil really comes from civilian, and it basically means that there's two different types of groups here. That there is, the military goes and occupies the nation. They move in and set up a base. They're the soldiers, but then the people that live in that land where they've set up their base are the civilians. Okay, so a civil law is really creating law for the other people, or the people you're occupying. Okay, and in the Civil War, that's exactly what happened. All right, the United States federal government came in and occupied all the free states, all the free nation states, and therefore created laws for them, a civil law. Okay, now prior to the Civil War, we had two different real forms of law. We still had the maritime admiralty courts, Admiral Street law, and we also had common law. Now, common law is the only law for people. Okay, if you're in a court and it's not a common law court, you're not being seen as people. You're not being seen with your constitutional rights. That's just facts. All right. If you look at the state statutes where you live, you'll see that they talk about persons and entities, and legal entities, and commercial entities, and all these other entities. And that's what admiralty law is, because if you think about it, if you're on a ship at sea, you ain't going nowhere, right? You're on that ship, and that ship's taking you from A to B, and unless you want to kill yourself, jump off the side, nothing you can do about it. Well, that's what the courts are like, because once you're in an admiralty court, that ship has you. The captain has you. They can decide on the controversy. Your rights don't matter whatsoever. It's all on what the captain thinks. And that's what civil courts are like. That's what admiralty courts are like. The judge is the king. Can decide if you have rights or you don't have rights. And that's the real problem there. So, and it's, admiralty law Maritime law, law of the sea, it's all trade, it's all commerce. You're only at sea to move stuff back and forth, okay? Or you're a pirate to go take stuff. But it's all of a commercial nature. And there's no land, so you don't have any territorial jurisdiction. And so everything associated with maritime courts, admiralty courts, has a commercial nature where they turn you into need you to be a commercial thing. And it's really about who has rights and who's getting money. All right, and we are in these civil courts only as persons, and persons are entities. All right, you can make your own person and say this is my entity, but these courts don't even allow for that. And at the end of the day, a person is really just a character you play. All right, so you as a man or a woman, that's who you are. You're a man or a woman. You can play lots of different characters, right? You might be a mother and a father, a teacher, an employee, a taxpayer, a driver, a civilian, a witness, an officer, a defendant. These are all persons. These are all characters, right? You don't show up for your kids in the same way you show up for your employer. You put on two different characters, all right? So when you go into these courts, it's just as this character. It's not you. They do not have any jurisdiction over you. They just trick you into being your person. Okay? Living people can only be seen in common law courts. Living people cannot be seen in civil courts. However, they still need you to agree to be part of the case. All right? They need you to agree to be the person. All right, and the fact that there are persons and people is evidenced by the Fourth Amendment, where people have the right to be secure in their persons. All right, they've always known this. This isn't a new thing. When the Constitution was written, they talked about persons. Okay, so this isn't a new idea. The only thing is that the persons that you're using now in these courts were created by somebody else. The 14th Amendment created them. You didn't create your person. So the state level courts, and this is for Colorado, I don't even think this is actually totally right, but you basically have these levels of courts, okay? You got courts that are broken up by types of cases or who would be in the case or where they're at. You know, basically the way to see it is like county courts or anything that has to do with cops. If there's a traffic issue, an eviction, the police get involved for anything, it's going to be through the county court. The state court, which is the next level up, you know, here in Colorado, it's pretty much county courts, state district courts, and there's the other ones here on the deal, but we rarely get involved in there. But the state district courts are much more the statutes. If someone's getting sued for violating a statute, it's going to go in the state court. And there's some other things that make court cases go into state courts, but that's really kind of the breakdown. So, for example, if you get foreclosed on, the state district court is going to take your house from you. The county court is going to come in and have you evicted. Yeah, I think I just said all this stuff. Yeah, all the statute-related stuff. And then there's the appeals court, all right? So if you are in county court and you don't like the decision, you would appeal it to the district court. And if you're in state district court and you need to appeal, you would go to the Court of Appeals, and then from there, you would go to the Supreme Court, and then from there, it would go up to federal court. Now, state courts and federal courts are very different, and it's very important. Everything in the state court is a civil law. It's a commercial nature. And a lot of the federal district courts are also civil law. However, per the Constitution and other originating acts, they have jurisdiction outside of commerce, outside of civil law. And there is equity courts, and there is a Article 3 Constitutional Court of Equity, which is what type of courts were outlined in the Constitution. But the system really looks like this, and there's really two different circuits. There's the district circuit, and then there's the circuit court. So your district courts are, the federal district courts are going to handle federal issues for a certain territory. Now, the circuit courts are basically just the appeals courts. So if you have a federal case and you appeal it, it's going to go to the Court of Appeals. You can't go straight to the Federal Court of Appeals, U.S. Court of Appeals. And so over here is really, if you can see my cursor, the U.S. Court of Appeals, U.S. District Court, this is what you're most likely going to run into. Even in Colorado, here in Denver, these two courts are in Denver. And they're really just a court of a district court and then a court of appeals. Now, the idea is that these court of appeals are the ones that deal with equity matters more, and that the district courts, since they can see civil law cases and appeals from the state courts, have that civil jurisdiction. And so if you want to get into a court of equity, you got to try and get into these court of appeals. However, if you have your process down, if you have your common law process down, and you know the ins and outs, you can file a common law case in the federal district court. Jurisdiction. Now, this is really important to understand about courts. Really important to understand. If you understand that the civil law is all commercial, it's all legal, then commerce and legality can't own actual land, can't have territorial jurisdiction. Only people that outright own the land, only the sovereign of the land, can have territorial jurisdiction, where they can write the laws how they want and try people however they want if they own the land. But none of us, even if we have title, clear title, we don't own the land. We just have rights to it. And that's what allows this entire civil law game to have jurisdiction over everything, because everything we're doing is actually doing it in a legal, commercial capacity. Simply by using your person and using your social security number, you're doing it in a commercial capacity, even if it's not a true corporation. So all our courts here have personal and subject matter jurisdiction. So yeah, territorial courts, if they're our common law courts, are where you would have territorial jurisdiction. And this is where they really trick us with Hollywood the worst. Like, we watch movies and we see somebody get a warrant, especially in the Old West, and they haul them into jail, and it's, you were in the territory, you broke the territorial laws, we can haul you into jail. That's true, that makes sense. However, what we have now isn't that. We get tricked. So they might do the same thing and say, hey, you broke the rules, you broke the statutes, we can haul you into jail. That's only because you and them are presuming that you're the person. Okay? So yeah, civil law is personal and subject matter. In fact, if you ask them for jurisdiction, they're only ever going to talk about these two. And even in the Colorado Rules of Civil Procedure, they only talk about personal and subject matter jurisdiction. They never talk about territorial. They don't want you to know and think and understand what territorial jurisdiction is. But at the end of the day, these courts, civil law courts, especially the state courts, are designed to do one thing, and that's to keep you confused so that you can't handle your own affairs. And you have to go to somebody else to handle your affairs. That's the only reason. Okay, moving on to the next chapter. How to avoid servicing. Now, if you're watching this video, this is why you should be watching this video. We are petrified, mortified of these courts, because they can just take and do whatever they want to us. They can lie through their teeth. It's awful. We do not belong in them. People do not belong in civil courts. But they still need your consent. They still need your consent. Even if you refuse it up and down, there's a way they got your consent, okay? And the first thing to understand is that you are not that person that they're talking about. Even though you have the same name, it ain't you. You're not their person, which you need to be as well. You can be treated like their person simply by participating. And unfortunately, showing up and refusing and arguing with them is participating. Nobody, including courts and judges, has jurisdiction over you without your consent. So the name of the game is to get your consent. Entities of commerce, corporations, may have certain rights established by statutes, but they have no right or authority to contract with another corporation or person. An action has to take place. A corporation just can't roll up to another corporation and tell them what to do. Now, a corporation can roll up to another corporation, and if that corporation pushes on them or takes something from them or talks to them, well, then all of a sudden there's a relationship there. And then you can start enforcing these rules, and you don't even have to be honest about it. So it's the same thing. However, on the high seas of commerce, certain actions can be construed to be an acceptance without contract. Engaging with a corporation or using the services they provide can create a contractual relationship and contractually enforceable duties. And that's what's happening. It's a commercial ensnarement. You're being treated and talked to like you would normally handle your affairs as a living soul, as a living man. But on their side, they're creating all these little commercial contracts. And they might not even know it. Might not even know it. It's just the system. So, we're doubling up here. Well, we'll go over it again. Territorial jurisdiction is the authority to make law and be the judge to any action that occurs on land you own by anyone else. So if you have territorial jurisdiction, you also have personal and subject matter jurisdiction. So without territorial jurisdiction, a court can still have personal and subject matter. Since nobody owns the land and everybody only has commercial rights to their land, territorial jurisdiction really doesn't exist anymore. Therefore, courts can only have personal and subject matter jurisdiction. They never automatically have jurisdiction. They absolutely need your consent. And what you give them consent whether you know it or not. So, to avoid court servicing, the first thing you got to absolutely know is there are two things. Okay, your living soul, your skin, your ears, your body, that's you. And you have a name, right? Well, there's something else with the exact same name. And it is a commercial entity. And it is a commercial entity created by the state. Fraudulent, tricky as all hell. They use your name for something else so that you will answer for it. And when you answer for it, they got you. Yeah, civil courts have no authority to bring people into their court, but they can trick people into court through the person with the same title. And that's what happens. When you were born, your birth certificate created another entity with the same name. So when they ask for the entity, you answer because it's also your living name. And because you answer for the entity, they don't think twice. They say, okay, we got him. Let's run this court case round them in circles. The courts can only claim jurisdiction and authority over their stuff, their persons who you claim to be. And that's what happens. And so when you get served, right? You get served, someone sues you, you're going to get served. They're going to send you a subpoena. And it's going to say on that subpoena, you have to answer this. So when you do answer, they have jurisdiction. And it's nuts. You get served, it's by a sheriff or a cop and says you have to go to court. If you go, you're screwed. Yeah, courts still need your consent. Unfortunately, they trick you out of it. Civil courts can only serve persons, okay? When they serve you, they're only serving a commercial entity. That's the only thing they can do. That's the only thing they can do. So, hypothetically, if you're on top of everything, if you get served, they're going to say, are you John Doe? Are you the name? Now, when you say yes, they're like, okay, we got service. Sign, I gave you this. I take this back to the court. The court thinks you've been served. Effectively, what's happened is they made you an offer. Are you so-and-so? That's an offer. When you say yes, then you got a deal. So, for some reason, and I don't think I could do this, to be honest with you. If somebody came up to me and asked me my name, I'm not sure I'd be wise to this. But this is what you really need to do. This is what needs to happen, all right? If at all possible, train yourself to ask someone if they were looking for the person anytime they ask you who you are. So, somebody comes up to you, a servicer, and says, hey, are you John Doe? Do you mean the person? They're probably going to say yes, because their paperwork says person all over it. And you say, no, I'm not your person. You can't be. You can't be forced to be a person ever. People have a right to be secure in their persons. If you're forcing me to be a person, you're violating the Constitution. You're violating my inalienable rights. You're committing treason. If you're forcing me to be a person, even if you're tricking me to be a person, okay? And that's where we're at. Reason. So, avoid court servicing. All right. If you do get served, it's not over. All right. It's just a presumption, really. They made the presumption that you're their thing. All right. The courts believe they now have jurisdiction over you. And if you show up, even to dispute being the person or their jurisdiction, you've taken action in response to their offer, and they will never think twice about being anything other than you being anything other than theirs. And there's tons of guys, people that have done it, showed up to court to try to say that they're not the thing, and they get beat up. Some people are successful. Some people get thrown in jail. So showing up to court to dispute it is not a good idea. It should be happened by mail beforehand. So here is an example of challenging the jurisdiction. All right. Just because they say they've served you, you haven't taken any action yet. So there's still room to dispute it. And you want to do it through paperwork. You want to file something. And this is what I'm going to show you in this video here. These videos here is how easy it is to file something. As pro se, how easy it is to challenge a jurisdiction. How easy it is to write a motion to dismiss. It's not hard. Okay? All right, you must challenge, rebuke, refuse, or deny their presumption or of your consent to be their person. And it's an uphill battle. All you've done so far is agree to your name is your name. That is not a contract. If you have been served, you must write a letter, a motion to dismiss, or a formal challenge to the jurisdiction rebuking their presumption that you've agreed to be responsible for their person. That's the trick. That's the name of the game. All right. There's lots of options. If you need help, let me know. You can write a letter in any form. You don't need to follow their rules to challenge their jurisdiction. You can write a very formal motion to dismiss, kind of like what you see here, or you could just write a very simple sentence. I refuse. I refuse duty for the person. I refuse to be the trustee for the person. I refuse to be responsible for the person. I see no evidence of any contract obligating me to be responsible for this person. And I definitely recommend do not show up. Mail stuff in, send paperwork in, send a lot of paperwork in. File stuff with the clerk, whatever. But you step across that bar and you got a bad attitude, they're going to make your life awful. But if you do show up, do not cross the bar. Just tell them that you're not the person, and if they give you a hard time, walk away. And even if they might file charges that you failed to show up in court, they'll do that. They will definitely do that. You got to constantly stand on being alive and not being their person. Yeah, do not show up to court. Okay, I'm going to pause, stop it here.